Hello, everyone. I'm Nick Alonge, and welcome to our second edition of Top Tips Dental Lab Technicians in today's digital workflow, brought to you by WeTeamUp. And today's guest is Pam Hanneman CDT. Hi, Pam.
Hey, Nick. How are you?
Good, good. So do me a favor. Will you tell everybody a little about yourself? Because we've been friends for a long time. I'd prefer it coming from you.
Sure, not a problem at all. So my pleasure. Very honored that you asked me to be on, so thank you. So I have been in dental since 1993. I started out opaquing, quickly fell in love with the industry, became an all-around ceramist, moved into managing a very large ceramics department for about 12-ish years, and then made the decision to go into more to the digital side. So I joined the CAP team, and I was running the milling center there for about 4.5 years. And currently I am in digital materials, training, and education. So I'm traveling around the US, going from lab to lab, helping them out with any issues they may have, educating on materials, digital and analog. And also I'm at the trade shows doing lectures and hands-on clinics. So that's what I'm doing these days, and I'm really happy to be doing it.
Excellent. Well, we've always discussed like a bunch of different things throughout the lab, but I know you specialize and have a lot of information on sintering.
Yes.
Mainly, like, I want to ask you some tips and tricks you've learned, some efficiency things that you do with zirconia. I know you sent me a bunch of slides, so we're going to go over those today. So some of the questions that I get or I've come across talking on the phone are, let me look at this one. Selecting the correct zirconia that matches sintering cycles is, I guess, the number one that I get on a regular basis.
Yeah, so I see that a lot too. So when you are selecting a zirconia or trying a new zirconia, it's really important that one, you're following the IFU and you're sintering it at the recommended temperature. Because what I do see a lot of is the temperature is too low, and the results that the customer are going to get are too opaque or too much chroma. And I usually see things that are sintered low on the lower end more than on the higher end. But if you want to bring up that slide, I have some examples of what actually happens.
Okay, there we go.
All right, so these crowns are all the same. The top and bottom are the same. On the far left, we have severely underfired, and towards all the way to the right, we have overfired. So this particular zirconia, it's a very commonly used, well-known zirconia. It's supposed to be sintered at 1550 Celsius. So the first crown was sintered at 1450, and I did this on purpose so that I would have examples, and so people can see what really happens. So, you know, we're 100C under the high temp, and really it just looks like chalk. It's very high in value. It looks white. You're not really seeing any chroma. Then if we sintered it, the second crown was sintered at 1500. We get a little more vitality, but it's still really high in value. Then if we are sintering, so the third one is at 1530. So we're only 20 Celsius away from the recommended temp. But what happens is you go from really white and chalky, and when you're really close to the high temp but slightly under, you end up with more chroma, but still high value. So a lot of people will describe that as my crown is too dark. And yes, it is. It has too much chroma. It really needed that 20 Celsius to achieve the proper shade. So the fourth crown is the proper, outcome, what we're looking for. And then lastly, I did one at 1590, which is 40 degrees Celsius higher than the recommended temp. And you can see that all of the chroma has been burnt out. It's very low in value, and it's also going to be more translucent. And when we've gone really far over the IFU, we are also compromising the strength of the zirconia. So we want to be very careful that we are following the IFU. You are safe to go 10 to 20 degrees higher if need be, but if you find yourself doing that, that's probably because your furnace isn't calibrated.
And that brings us to our next slide, the question that I wanted to bring up. Yeah. So let me pull up that slide.
So calibration is really important, right? It doesn't matter what the display says on the furnace. You can program your furnace properly, but if you're not doing the maintenance of calibrating, um, then what that readout, it is not really true. It's not telling you, it's not representative of what's happening in the furnace chamber. So it's really easy to calibrate. And the ovens we have these days are great. They don't need to be calibrated that much. If you start to see, or that often, if you start to see a problem, maybe then you want to look at your program, make sure that's programmed properly. And if so, then look into your calibration.
Mm-hmm.
So basically you would get a zirconia ring to sinter. You would sinter it at 3C per minute up to 1600 Celsius and hold it for an hour. This instruction is specifically for the Sintra Plus. This is what I had on hand. But most furnaces are similar. They may be a little bit different of a program, but this is the basic. That ring is going to shrink. You're going to measure it with some calipers. And it's best to use a digital measuring device. And based on the shrinkage, you will have a conversion chart, and that will tell you how far off your furnace is. Usually they're off, they're a little cooler than they should be, because as the heating elements age, they start to lose their ability to conduct heat.
Mm-hmm.
So then you would just go in to your furnace and reset the calibration, and you should be all set after that. But super easy. And if you do need help, I'm sure that whoever you purchased your furnace from is able to help you get it back into calibration.
Yeah, so I want to go to the two different types of elements before we go into the purging side, just because I'm noticing, wow, there's a lot of different types of ovens out there, a lot of different also types of elements that are used in them. So let's go across the two that are most common in dental sintering ovens.
So the most common one these days that I run across is the Mosey 2, and that's the U-shaped element. You might see this in like a Programat, the Ivoclar furnace, or you might see it in the Sintra Plus. And those are great heating elements. They allow you to go to a very high temperature, so you're not limited with zirconia. If you have a zirconia that sinters really high and you have this kind of heating element, no problem at all. And the only downside, which I don't really consider a downside, it's just that you have to do some maintenance and you need to calibrate. And these also need to be purged, which we'll talk about in just a minute.
Mm-hmm.
They do have a longer lifespan than the silicone carbide, which you see on the right side. Those traditionally, I come across those a lot, like in the Nabrotherm or the Dikema, and they're still great heating elements. These don't need to be purged. But they do not heat up to such a high temperature as the Mosey 2. So the silicone carbide, you can go up to 1560 with them, but if you pass 1530, you are shortening the life of those elements. And when you change them out, you do have to change all of them at the same time. They're both great heating elements. It's just, these are your options. It's important to know what you have and what kind of maintenance you need to do with them.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things that I came across all the time, because I ran a milling center as well, is when the silicon carbide start to go bad, we get those like little, like you mentioned earlier to me, baby bubbles when they get snot out of their nose, and right away.
Exactly.
Oh no. Two things have happened. One, it's now the oven is probably contaminated. And two, I need to change out that element and need to do also change out the straps on the inside that bring them all together. That's one thing that I did not like about the silicon carbide, because you always had to change something out. It was such a pain. The Mosey 2s I liked because you could heat them up, get that nice, beautiful glaze on them again. However, there's sometimes, you can maybe explain a little bit more, that you'll notice a growing of a crystal on the Mosey 2s from time to time that end up kind of contaminating the oven.
Sure.
You want to talk about that really quick?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go back to the silicone carbide for just a moment. So one of the visual cues to look for and see if you're pushing those heating elements beyond their capacity is that, like you said, Nick, they'll grow bubbles. I'll pass on the snot from the child's nose, but I'll go with those little bubbles. They stick in the plastic and they blow.
Oh,
One of
yeah,
those
that's
things.
a better one. Yeah,
Yeah.
because they do have that opalescence effect to them too. It's crazy.
I'm not offended by a little snot, but I like the bubbles.
Yeah.
So that's actually what it looks like on the heating element. And they can grow like to be a pretty decent sized bubble. And what that is the silica burning off of your element. And that silica is actually needed to protect the heating element. And it's also there to help the element conduct heat. So as we start to burn it off, the more bubbles are growing, the more you're deteriorating your heating element, it will start to lose its ability to conduct heat. They don't necessarily get contaminated. That's kind of like the good thing, that why people like the silicone carbide is they don't get contaminated. But they do have a shorter life, and you can't achieve as high of a temp without shortening the life of them dramatically. Now with the Mozy 2, those do get contaminated, but it's easily taken care of by a purge cycle, you know, that you could do over the weekend. Press play, go home, come back, and they're purged. So what you want to look for on a Mozy 2 is almost like a calcification or a white, chalky, sort of crystally buildup on the heating element itself. And those little particles, yes, exactly. So those here on this slide, what's happening is the quartz that's building up on your Mozy 2 will eventually fall off into your tray of beads. You're going to then put your crowns in those trays, and notice that you're getting white, perfect white dots. And a lot of times people will call and say, there's something wrong with my zirconia. There's absolutely nothing wrong with the zirconia. That's actually the quartz. You put your crown into the tray, occlusal side down to sinter. The quartz that was already in that tray is melting into the zirconia. If you grind on those little white spots, they'll actually open up and it'll be all airy and porous inside, like a white powder will come out, and that is quartz. The solution, half of the solution is to, yes, change your beads or to clean out your tray if you're not using beads, but that's sort of a band-aid. The real solution is that you need to purge your furnace, or those flakes are gonna, the quartz is gonna fall right back into the next tray, and this will continue to happen. So we wanna run a purge cycle. Another thing that happens when these heating elements, you know, it's just the natural lifespan of the elements. It's just what happens as we use them. There is a little bit of iron inside of those elements as well. And when the quartz comes off, it rips off some of the iron. And iron is actually one of the elements. There isn't many that discolor zirconia, but iron is one. And you will see kind of a orangey or very dark yellow hue on your restorations. And so that's kind of a clue. Geez, I might need to look at my heating elements and check them out, and maybe I need to run a purge cycle. And so the purge cycle is real easy. I think we have a slide on that as well.
I didn't grab that one.
Oh, you did? Okay. So it's all right. It's very similar to the calibration cycle. So the purge cycle is basically that same cycle, except you're holding it for 4 hours instead of 1 hour, but exact same thing. And you don't need to put a ring in there. So these restorations on the top of the screen, those were all milled out of the same shade material, and they were put into 3 different furnaces with 3 different levels of contamination, and you can see we got 3 different shades. Now that's not because of the material, that's because of the contamination that was depositing on each restoration out of each oven. So this particular customer was having some real challenges, and they were very upset, rightfully so. To have to keep remilling and sintering a roundhouse is pretty costly, not just material, but labor and time. So, you know, it's kind of nice for me. I just kind of pop in and I give them this easy solution, and I get to be the hero and leave. When I leave, you know, I'm like, hey, I did nothing, but, you know.
The knowledge, that's the sauce, the magic sauce, this whole thing is.
I had to learn this the hard way too. You know, I've been doing it for a while. So I experienced these things and learned as I went. So yeah, we purged the furnaces and everything went back to looking great and everybody was happy.
Oh, cool. Well, that brings me to the second one question of the day is, what do you do to prepare for the zirconia in the green stage? Some people don't do anything and they center it and then they go mad hass grinding it down and,
Yep.
dust everywhere. I know the two of us have a different philosophy to that.
Okay.
So what tools do you use? What some special techniques can you offer us? Do you spend a lot of time finishing in the green stage? These are some of the questions that I have for you.
So I think we should be doing very minimal adjusting of that zirconia in the green state and in after it's sintered. Um, if we're having to make a lot of adjustments, I think that's a real signal that we need to go back and look at our designs and kind of dial in our parameters with our designs. They should be, pretty much right on the money with minor adjustments. That being said, my philosophy, how I like to approach it is if something needs to be done, I much rather do it in the green state than after the zirconia is sintered. Because what happens is we're using tools that are pretty aggressive. They can cause heat just as you're grinding on the zirconia. And we all know that zirconia is really strong, but its one enemy is thermal shock. And
Mhm.
we do create thermal shock with the tools that we use after the zirconia is sintered. So I like to, if I'm going to open any embrasures, for instance, I have some of the tools with me that I might use.
Oh,
Uh,
cool.
Even though I'm at home on my patio, I've got some extra tools to show.
Are you one of the gals that always keeps your tools in your purse just in case?
I have a caboodle, actually. It's an 8-up case that I keep with me. So I do find a lot that anyone that's doing large bridges, they often have fractures interproximally. And what's happening is, I'm a ceramist. I love to go in there and open up those embrasures, right? We want that aesthetic appeal. But you can't really do that on sintered zirconia. What you're doing when you take a diamond disc to sintered zirconia, you're actually scoring it. Just like if you were laying tile and you needed to cut a tile, you'd score it and then snap it. That's exactly what you're doing with the zirconia. So I like to do it in the green state. And I do it with, this is an incredibly thin, very
Wow.
flexible rubber wheel. I don't know how well you can see it.
It looks paper thin. It looks maybe,
Yep,
less than a half millimeter.
it's pretty thin. And I love it. It's my favorite. So I can use this and I can go in approximally, open up my embrasure, but I can also open up my incisal embrasure with it. And when I am, opening up the embrasure, it's so flexible that I can also adjust my line angle. So I'm kind of doing multi-functions with one tool, which is great because I want an aesthetic outcome, but I also want to work efficiently because I don't want to waste my time.
Yeah.
So having the right tool for the job is really important. So for opening embrasures, whether it's interproximal or incisal, or even adjusting your line angle, this is an awesome tool. Any really super thin, flexible rubber wheel. If you have one that's too thick, you can just true it down so that it is nice and thin. The other thing you can do with this is if you are putting characterization into a large bridge, you can make some mamelons with this. I do encourage you to be careful. So I'm super heavy-handed, so I gotta be really careful, or you're end up smoothing stuff out in the end. You can also use it to open up dissectional groove, buccal or lingual. So super handy tool. Very, very thin, flexible green rubber wheel. I do want to step back for a minute, though, and talk about sprues. So I've seen a lot where the sprues will be cut off, but we still leave a good chunk of it on there because we're too afraid that the person that's doing the post-processing is going to go too far and gouge it.
Mm-hmm.
So a solution for that is, yeah, take it down with your white silicone wheel that everybody uses, or something like a polishing wheel. This just happens to be the Ceraglaze polishing wheel with a flat end. Smooth down the sprue almost so it's gone, but not completely. But then if you take, traditionally these were used for acrylic polishing and finishing. So this is a medium grit, it's bullet shaped, and because it's convex, and your tooth is convex, wherever that sprue is, it's kind of hovering over where the remainder of the sprue is left. And as soon as it's gone, just stop. And you end up with a beautiful surface, and you didn't gouge it. You'd have to work really hard to gouge it with this. So this is also something that's safe if you have someone that's new or you're training. And when you're finished, you can smooth everything out with this as well. If you had any parting lines, if the mill wasn't calibrated and you needed to smooth it out a little, that's an awesome tool for that as well. So those are the ones that I use the most. And of course, if it already is sintered, please use the correct tools. Just don't go crazy on them. You do not want to heat up the zirconia. You're going to cause fractures. You won't see them, but when you pass it on to that poor stain and glaze person and they heat it up, that thermal shock is going to cause that fracture to grow, and everyone's going to be hating on the stain and glaze person, and it wasn't even them.
Yeah, that's the sad part.
Two great wheels. You know, there's a few companies that make them, but basically this is like a Yellowstone, and it's specifically made for zirconia. And this is the green stone, that a light green, that most people are familiar with these. And you know, you can get them from several places. But when you're selecting your tools, make sure that you're using something that is for zirconia. If you have to grind aggressively, you better have some water there next to you. And you better take your time and do it slow, or you are going to cause fractures. The other thing, Nick, that I didn't, we really weren't going to talk about, but I feel kind of passionate about, and I have to throw it in there.
Okay, go for it.
So if we are doing a lot of finishing after it's sintered and we're scratching up that zirconia, please, 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 I don't care if the stain and glaze person is going to sandblast it and then glaze it. We have to smooth those scratches out. You need to finish that crown with a rubber wheel and smooth out any scratches. It does not matter how much glaze the technician is going to put on there. That glaze eventually is going to wear away, and that poor patient is going to have a crown with scratches in it, and it's going to wear away their opposing dentition. Zirconia is very gentle to the opposing as long as it is polished. That's the rule.
A lot of people forget about that. It's pretty amazing. I'll watch people just take a dime and grind it and then give it to the guy to glaze it. And I'm sitting there in the room, they're there as a consultant. I'm like, can you use this polishing wheel to do that? Oh, that's too much time. Well, it's going to come back, because that's going to be the problem.
You know, I get that argument a lot. It's too much time to rubber wheel it. Well, it takes 2 seconds, really.
Yeah.
If you designed it properly and you finished it properly in post-processing, you should do such minimal finishing after it's sintered. Really, you could do all your finishing with a rubber wheel. You could use an aggressive rubber wheel to smooth down that margin and seat the contacts. And also, the 2 seconds it takes to rubber wheel it, you're going to save time staining and glazing, because you can get away with staining and glazing it just once instead of 2 or 3 times.
Yeah, that's true.
Because it just comes out with a beautiful finish right from the start.
Especially with today's pre-shaded discs. I mean, I've seen some products out there that are not even glazed. They're just hand polished and off they go, and they look spectacular in the mouth. They also feel really neat. You know, that's what I've heard from the patients. I haven't had any restorations like that, so I wouldn't personally know, but it feels similar to natural dentition because it has that same slippery effect compared to what porcelain glaze has.
Yeah,
So,
if there's one thing that, you know, everyone takes away is please polish the zirconia if you did scratch it up and grind on it.
Yeah. So one of the other things that I laugh or I get across is, hey, my oven didn't fire fully. The cycle only went to so-and-so. It's kind of not fully centered. Can I recenter this or just hit go? And
yeah, so I've tried it just out of curiosity. The units that I recentered, I caught them pretty quickly. I think they were under 1200 Celsius when I caught, you know, there was something wrong with the cycle. And I did recenter them, and they definitely were not an ideal restoration. I wouldn't want to send that out. So I would recommend don't waste your time. Just remill it and recenter it. You'll actually save time if you do that.
I agree. And you'll keep the doctor and patient happy is what I've noticed. Now, I'm going to kind of skip over the dipping because we dry that stuff. I mean, I think it's a common knowledge now that everybody knows to dry before they throw it right into an oven.
Well, you would think that,
Okay.
but I think we should hit upon it. If you are using green state shading liquids, you really need to dry that zirconia for 25 minutes under a heat lamp before putting it into your furnace, specifically if your furnace has MOSI 2 elements. Those laminates are going to deposit on your elements and then deposit back onto the next tray of crowns you put in there. Drying the zirconia or not drying it doesn't really have an effect on the zirconia. It's really to keep your furnace running properly and not having to do extra maintenance.
Correct. And I've gone into labs. You see the whole furnace rusted out. And you're
Yeah.
like, well, how old is this? Oh, it's only 6 months old. It's a crappy furnace. And I'm like, I've been in hundreds of labs and they all fine except for this one. And you ask to see it. And of course, you got the guy dipping it and he puts it on a little paper towel and then right into the oven. And you're like, you pretty much just poured muriatic acid right into your oven. It's kind of what you do.
Fortunately, a lot of the shading liquids we use now are water-based. They still do have a little bit of acid in them, but nothing like what we were using, 7 years ago. That was some bad stuff.
You want to wear goggles and gloves and have the evaporation going. So yeah, it was pretty crazy. Yeah. Now I want to get into mainly like placement for singles, how close to get together, full arch placement. Some potential problems that we have seen with that. I'll probably bring back another slide. And then sintering beads, or do you sinter without beads?
Sure. So I've used the beadless sintering trays quite a bit. I'm a fan of them. If I don't need to buy beads, then that's great. I know that there is the debate out there that without the beads, you're not allowing your large bridges to shrink and move freely. I haven't had any issues at all, and we're talking about thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands of units that I've overseen. Yeah, so really it's your preference. I personally prefer the beadless tray. If I'm doing like an all-on-4, all-on-X large roundhouse, I'm typically not even using a tray because a lot of times they don't fit. So what I do is just make sure the support bar is nice and even and flat, and I'll actually set the restoration right into the furnace. You can put it on the lid of a tray or you can put it directly on the furnace platform. And by doing that, it's standing up. You can put 2 in there. As long as you got the right program and it's long enough, everything's going to work out great.
Yeah, that's cool. What about single units? Have you ever had any stick together before? When you're
you want to make sure that, you can fill your tray. Just make sure that they're not touching. Because if they are, then when they come out and you break them apart, you're gonna get a little fracture there, and we don't want that. Mm-hmm. You can put 1 tray in a furnace at a time, or if you have a furnace that accommodates, you can stack 3 trays. Just when you're doing that, make sure that you're using a long program and not a fast cycle.
Yes, yeah, that's going to be one of the last things that we're going to talk about. So what other common problems that you see other than what we discussed here, like opaquing, units coming out cracked? Do you also recommend sticking with the manufacturer's temperature programs or kind of going rogue on your own? There's a lot going on here. And then also, what about fast firing? There's a lot of debate these days on fast firing. Sure. I'm a fan of it because like you, we learned how to do it together. Yeah. I think you sent me hundreds of documents on this is what happened this time. This is what happened this time. So it was neat to be part of that because I actually got to see. Let me show you guys. We'll just jump right into the fast firing because it's kind of a cool. So this was the document that we would get updated all the time. Well, one of them.
Sure. So, when fast sintering first came out, I was very skeptical. But over the years, we have had amazing advancements, not only in our furnaces, but the materials we use, right? We've really come a long way. And I'm really impressed with zirconia. And I was not a zirconia lover in the beginning. I was, a ceramist. I wanted to layer porcelain. But honestly, the stuff that we have now is wonderful. So the first thing is make sure that the zirconia has been approved for a fast sintering cycle. The manufacturer will put that on the IFU. My basic rule of thumb is if it's a really thin unit or thin to like an average size thickness unit, you're going to be fine to do a fast sinter. And by fast sinter, we're talking about 2 hours. Mm-hmm. So veneers, inlays, single anterior, single posterior, as long as they're not very thick, over 2.5 millimeters. copings or abutment copings that we're going to put on a hybrid or a tie base, all fine. Even a 3-unit coping bridge, as long as it's nice and thin and no really large connectors. So those are all really safe, but we never want to put more than 10 units in a tray at a time or put multiple trays, because we have a very fast cycle. The heat rate is going to be much faster, and as we discussed, zirconia is not a very good conductor of heat. So your furnace may reach 1550, but if the units are too thick or there's too much in there, they have not had the time that they need to absorb all of that heat, and they're not going to sinter properly. So that's why it needs to be under 10 units, and the units need to be thin. If you start going into a 3-unit full contour bridge, that's really iffy. You could do it, but you're definitely going to have a less than superior result. It's definitely going to be compromised. Screw retained bridge, absolutely not. They're just way too thick. Any large bridge or frame, we don't want to do that. There's too many connectors. We're going to get warping. And, you know, absolutely not an all-on-4 or anything like that. I have one to show, and you can see it looks horrible, right?
Here, let me zoom into that real quick.
What?
I'm going to zoom into that. There you go.
So I don't know if you can, this was under fired. So
Looks like a nice, beautiful bone right there.
Yeah, I took it from someone's junk drawer, so I don't know exactly what they did, if they used the wrong program or they didn't hold it long enough or there was something wrong with the furnace. But I mean, this is horrifying when you get this, come in the morning and see that.
Yeah, your heart drops.
It almost looks like, I don't know what it looks like. But, you know, you don't want that. So you're never going to fast sinter an all-on-4 ever. And the important thing to remember is just make sure the zirconia is approved for a fast sinter. And then also make sure that the units are not thick and you're not putting more than 10 units at a time in the furnace on a fast program.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I've always been an advocate of spend the time to do it right, because you don't have time to do it over.
Yeah.
I mean,
no, we don't. And I will say, as skeptical as I was in the beginning, I have done a lot of testing just to validate for myself, because if I'm going to recommend something, I want to make sure I've seen it firsthand.
Yeah.
And the zirconia that's fast fired versus the normal cycle, you really can't tell the difference. So they really are coming out a nice quality, a nice outcome, but the zirconia needs to be approved for fast sintering.
Okay, that's good. That's good to know. Thank you. I think we hit up pretty much every question that I had for you.
All right.
I want to say, man, thank you. This is super informative for everybody out there. Thanks for spending the afternoon with me, Pam.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks for joining me on my patio while I'm restricted to just staying at my house. So this was fun. And I hope everyone got a little something out of this. And always my pleasure. And I hope we can do this again, Nick.
All right, we will. I'll set something up for the future. All right, everyone. Thank you for joining. We'll see you again.
Bye-bye.